Okay, so I wanted to give you a brief overview of the geographic bars in the Lanham Act and tee up the questions that I want to talk about in class. So there's the bar on primarily geographically descriptive registrations or primarily geographically deceptively misdescriptive. And here we get a bit of divergent treatment, but you may see that we've come back around to the same situation at the end of our journey. So there are 3 points I want to make. The geographic descriptiveness refusal can be overcome by showing secondary meaning, but after 1993, geographically deceptively misdescriptive marks are absolutely barred from registration. This was made this change was made to conform to our international commitments. So you can register glass wax for a polish with no wax in it if you prove secondary meaning. That's just deceptively misdescriptive, but you can't do that with a geographically deceptively misdescriptive mark, even if you show secondary meaning. The rationale is that Europe protects geographic indications of origin more aggressively. They don't like it when geographic terms are used by producers from outside an area. This also explains the TRIPS prohibition on using geographic indicators for goods produced outside the place, even if you're using variants like style or type, which consumer protection law would ordinarily think was useful for consumers. Under the Lanham Act, the questions we ask about geographic terms start off very similar to the questions we ask about descriptiveness and deceptiveness, only they're geographically specific. So you can see, is it primarily a signifier of geographic origin? Would there be a goods place association, which is similar to would people believe it? And then finally, materiality is the same. We have Newbridge for cutlery, a geographic refusal. Is Newbridge generally known to the public? No, thus we stop our inquiry there. Examiners have limited evidence available to them, mostly database searches. So this Newbridge case is a really good example of the kinds of evidence that examiners are going to have to rely on. And you can see it just wasn't enough here. But if there had been, 5,000 entries for Newbridge in these sources, that would have been enough. The question that I will ask you in class is, okay, so what kind of mark is Newbridge for cutlery under the Abercrombie spectrum, given that we've stopped at question 1? Different scenario is Inri Bike, Baikalskaya for vodka. The examiner concludes, based on searches similar to those in Newbridge, that Lake Baikal is well known enough for the relevant consumers to recognize it as a geographic term. And a goods place association is presumed because the goods are actually from the place. Thus, it is plausible because of where the goods are from that consumers would understand that's where the goods are from. This is also a producer side perspective. We presume that this happens in order to keep the term available for competition. Again, since you're going to be able to show secondary meaning, this is not an unbreakable barrier, but it is enough to make us hesitate because other people in the area might also produce the thing. The result, we presume that it's descriptive, and you're going to have to show secondary meaning. I'm going to show you a contrasting decision. So the mark is London, Soho, New York. The bags are not made in London or New York. The PTO finds that the ambiguity and structure of the mark leads a consumer to focus on the Soho portion. This in turn minimizes the impression that the mark indicates the origin of goods, but rather takes on a more atmospheric impression by referencing not London and New York per se, but the artsy Soho neighborhoods of these cities. There was also no record evidence that the bags were made in either place, so there was no presumption of a goods place association. And you can consider what evidence that the examiner might have brought to try and create that. So this is a case where the ambiguity and the fact that there's a Soho in London and a Soho in New York essentially help convert this to what some people call geographically suggestive rather than geographically descriptive. However, cautionary note, the presence of other matter, generally, if you add other stuff that's descriptive, that will not detract from the primarily geographically descriptive significance of the mark as a whole. So this is a geographically descriptive mark. It's got other stuff in it, but the America part is geographically descriptive. So that is geographic descriptiveness. Now we go on to geographic misdescriptiveness. And this is starts out, again, quite similar to deceptiveness. So Alaska bananas. Alaska is indeed primarily a signifier of geographic origin. That is the primary, almost the only meaning of Alaska. However, until global warming is further along, prospective purchasers are not likely to believe or the geographic misdescription or make a goods place association between Alaska and bananas. The result is this is arbitrary or suggestive. It is registrable immediately. This result should look familiar from the general deceptiveness inquiry. So far, so good. But then the Federal Circuit really screws things up in a case called California Innovations. So the mark is California Innovations for thermal insulated bags for food and beverages and insulated thermal wraps. The Federal Circuit says, well, the NAFTA amendments changed the rules. Before NAFTA, geographically misdescriptive marks could be registered in the same way as geographically descriptive marks by showing secondary meaning. After NAFTA, under 2E3, geographically deceptively misdescriptive marks can't be registered even with secondary meaning. It is an absolute bar. Thus, the Federal Circuit concludes the test for rejecting a deceptively misdescriptive mark is no longer a simple lack of distinctiveness, but the higher showing of deceptiveness. Remember that the PTO has the burden to show that the registration should be rejected. So that means that 2E3 has actually become harder to invoke than it was before the NAFTA amendments. In this case, the fact that the public was likely to believe that the mark identified the place from which the good originate, and the goods did not, in fact, originate from that place, raised an inference of deception. But the Federal Circuit said a mere inference is not enough to establish the deceptiveness that brings the harsh consequence of non-registrability. Instead, the PTO has to show that the goods place association is material to the consumer's decision to purchase the goods. So now, the legal standard under Section A for deceptiveness is identical to the legal standard under Section E3 for geographic deceptive misdescriptiveness. And I'm sorry about that. It does screw up the adverbs versus adjectives things. But we might as well call 2E3 geographic deceptiveness. Result. Is the term primarily a signifier of geographic origin? Yes, that's what California generally means. If so, are prospective purchasers likely to associate the goods in the place? Yes, they are. Bags, of course, can come from California. Lots of stuff can come from California. It's reasonable to think it might come from California. If so, is the geographic misdescription likely to affect the decision to buy? No, they would believe that the bags came from California, but they wouldn't care. So under the Federal Circuit rule, the mark is not geographically deceptively misdescriptive. This is quite messed up. The NAFTA amendments clearly intended to make misdescriptive geographic terms unregistrable, whether origin was material or not. That is, even if consumers don't currently care about origin. The whole point was to let places develop a reputation, which could then be enforced against. They wanted this protection to keep terms like Parmesan or any other geographic term from becoming shorthand for a type of product. And the California Innovations rule instead makes it easier, perhaps, to register these geographically deceptive marks. So Congress intended the harsh consequences of non-registrability. The Federal Circuit simply rewrote the statute so as not to provide it. So the question that I will ask in class, we know what type of mark California Innovations isn't for bags. It is not geographically deceptively misdescriptive. What type of mark is California Innovation for bags under Abercrombie? And that is the question that I will ask you in class, and hopefully we can have a discussion about it. Thank you.